Ever wonder why your side of town feels like a different world from the nice part of the city? Like someone, somewhere, decided your future before you were even born? Today, that decision is exactly what this video uncovers. Before we dive in, pause for a second. If you care about how history still shapes your rent, your school, your safety, and your sense of belonging, hit subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who grew up on the other side of town. The more people see this, the harder it becomes to pretend these lines never existed. Hidden lines, open wounds. Look at these two neighborhoods. Same city, same weather, same time of day, totally different realities. One has fresh paint, parks, and grocery stores. The other has crumbling buildings, liquor stores, and empty lots. Why do these divisions exist? Is it just bad choices, market forces, or something deeper baked into the blueprint of our cities? Now imagine zooming out and seeing this pattern repeated across the country. Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, Baltimore, Houston, different places, same invisible border. Studies show that neighborhoods starved of investment generations ago still experience higher poverty today, while wealth clusters in areas that were favored long ago. What if these differences are not accidents, but the product of carefully drawn lines? Lines that never show up on a GPS, but quietly shape who gets opportunity and who gets left waiting. What does your neighborhood say about history? Drop your city in the comments. Describe what it looks like. Are there places you were told not to go growing up? The architect of inequality, redlining's genesis. Now it is time to name the shadow, redlining. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the federal government helped create maps for hundreds of cities to guide banks on where it was safe to lend money for home loans. Neighborhoods were graded from A to D. A areas, shaded green, were considered the best, usually white, affluent, and often explicitly protected by racially restrictive covenants. D areas, shaded in red, were labeled hazardous, often because black families or other people of color lived there. These redlined neighborhoods were not risky because of the bricks or the streets. They were marked risky because of who lived in them. As one analysis shows, neighborhoods with any significant African American presence were almost always pushed into the lowest grade, even when the housing stock was similar to nearby white areas. Overnight, entire communities were flagged as places where banks should not lend, where investment should be withheld, and where improvement was seen as a waste. When researchers overlay these 1930s redlining maps on modern maps, something chilling appears. Redlined areas from nearly 90 years ago overwhelmingly line up with today's low-income neighborhoods and communities of color. And this disinvestment did not just affect mortgages. Less lending meant fewer homeowners, less tax revenue, and fewer resources for schools, parks, infrastructure, and basic services. Think about that. If your grandparents were blocked from getting fair loans, they could not buy property in growing areas, could not build equity, and could not pass wealth on to your parents or to you. Echoes in brick and mortar, modern manifestations. Redlining as a policy was outlawed decades ago, but its fingerprints are still on the bricks, the air, and even the life expectancy in many neighborhoods today. Research shows that areas once redlined still have higher rates of poverty and are more likely to be home to people of color, even though the original maps were drawn in the 1930s. In many cities, historically redlined communities have fewer trees and parks, more heat-absorbing pavement, and are closer to highways and industrial zones, increasing exposure to pollution. Public schools serving these areas often operate with fewer resources, creating unequal access to quality education that stretches across generations. And when transit routes and job centers develop elsewhere, residents can spend more time commuting, less time with family, and have fewer chances to access high-wage jobs. Let's spotlight one example: New York City. A public health data story from NYC shows that neighborhoods graded poorly on historic redlining maps still have higher poverty and worse health outcomes today compared with better graded areas. This pattern is not unique to New York. Similar findings appear in cities across the U.S. where redlining maps exist. Imagine growing up watching shiny new developments rise in other parts of town while your block waits for a basic grocery store, a bank branch, or a safe park. That is what structural inequality looks like from the sidewalk. Question for you. If you live near a highway, factory, or rail line, how often do you think about why it runs through your neighborhood and not someone else's? The economic and social ripple effect. When a neighborhood is labeled too risky for investment, the damage does not end with one rejected loan. It spreads across time like ripples in a pond. Financially, redlining helped lock Black families and other marginalized groups out of the single biggest wealth-building tool in American history, the mid-20th century housing boom. Lower rates of home ownership, depressed property values, and fewer small business loans meant residents had less opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. Recent research on wealth shows that households of color still hold significantly less wealth than white households, leaving them more vulnerable to crises and material hardship. Those gaps are not random. They sit on top of the old map. But the ripple does not stop at money. Public health studies link historically redlined neighborhoods to higher rates of chronic conditions like diabetes and hypertension, and even higher early mortality from heart disease. These health gaps are not about individual choices alone. They reflect decades of limited access to quality healthcare, healthy food, safe housing, and clean environments in neighborhoods starved of investment. Socially, these divides fracture trust. When your community feels left behind, it becomes harder to believe that systems are fair. Underinvestment can lead to higher crime rates and fewer positive outlets for young people, reinforcing stereotypes that blame the neighborhood instead of the policies that shaped it. Redlining did not just draw lines on a map. It drew lines through relationships, opportunity, and hope. In the comments, share this. What is one opportunity you feel your neighborhood never got? More jobs? Better schools? Safer streets? Building a more equitable future? Here is the most important part. If people made these lines, people can also unmake them. Across the country, advocates, planners, and organizers are working to reverse the legacy of redlining with policies like equitable development, inclusionary zoning, community land trusts, and targeted reinvestment in historically excluded neighborhoods. Some cities are using redlining maps as a guide for where to focus funds for affordable housing, green spaces, and infrastructure, aiming to repair decades of deliberate neglect. Grassroots groups are also pushing for stronger tenant protections, fair lending, and ownership models that keep housing affordable over the long term. But this is not just about policy. It is about you. Here are 3 actions you can take after watching. Look up your city's historic redlining map and compare it to today's income, race, and health data. Many tools from researchers and advocacy groups make this easy to explore online. Support local organizations. In formerly redlined neighborhoods, whether they focus on housing justice, youth programs, health clinics, or environmental cleanup. Start conversations. Ask your elders about how they chose where to live, what they were allowed to buy, and what lines they remember, spoken or unspoken. Oral history is powerful evidence, from shadow to blueprint. The story of redlining is not ancient history. It is woven into whose rent is rising, whose school has mold in the ceiling, whose lungs breathe cleaner air, and who lives long enough to retire comfortably in 2025. Understanding this history is not about guilt. It is about clarity. Once you see the hidden lines, you can start helping redraw the map. If this video made you look at your city differently, do 3 things right now. Comment with your city and what side of town you grew up on. Share this with someone who thinks inequality is just about personal responsibility. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next deep dive into the hidden history shaping Black life and urban spaces today. Because the shadow of redlining is long, but together, we can turn that shadow into a blueprint for more just, inclusive cities where opportunity is not limited to the right side of a line.